Hello, First Presbyterian members and friends of First Presbyterian Church. We welcome you to our fifth session of our Deconstructing Racism course that has been going forward for the past several weeks, examining very hard issues about the impact of race and racism and the history of our church as related to the history of Greensboro. And we have today are arriving at 1979, when Greensboro experienced the Greensboro Massacre, which was an event, a horrific event, where the Nazi and Klan people attacked members of the African American community who had come to Greensboro for a demonstration, and they were attacked and killed. And subsequent to that, there has been a lot of controversial review of that event. And it led to this establishment of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was founded like the one in South Africa. And in fact, Desmond Tutu, when he was in the United States, consulted with the people who were working on our Truth and Reconciliation initiative. So that has been a long-standing issue in Greensboro. The City Council recently apologized for the events of the activities of the police related to it. There are a number of articles and resources on our resource list for you to refer to, and in particular, I bring your attention to the recounting of the article that by our Presbyterian leader, Herbert Nelson, that we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Greensboro Massacre. He came and made a very strong speech or sermon about the event, and I particularly commend that to you. So we have today a video recording of an interview with Nelson and Joyce Johnson, who have subsequently established the Beloved Community Center, a meeting place for people from across our community to come and consider and think through and pray about significant issues in our community. So we will listen to that video. And Victoria Alexander is here to also talk with us about her experiences in interviewing people who related to the Black Lives Matter demonstration of last summer. So this week, we're focusing on more current events of issues of racism in our church and in our community.
Thank you, Margaret. My interview is with Gina Franco, a local Greensboro artist and activist who was moved during the protests last summer to just grab her paint and come downtown. And it ultimately started a movement that snowballed and is now being studied in classes at UNC Greensboro, and we've seen other people take up art and activism as well. And it's important to note that while this protest movement is ongoing, in Greensboro as well, we have Marcus Smith, who was killed by Greensboro police in 2018, and the City Council is still debating whether or not to hold accountable the police officers who were there that day. And Marcus Smith's family has filed a lawsuit against the city, and so we wanted to lift that up as well. There's an article about that also in the resource list. And we hope that you approach this week with an open mind. And both of our conversations, the people have some really incredible things to say. So we hope that you get as much out of it this week as we did.
Well, hello, brothers and sisters at First Presbyterian Church. We're proceeding with our journey of deconstructing racism and learning about the events that have happened in our history of our church and the history of our community that bring attention to the importance of our deconstructing racism. And in this morning, I'm Margaret Arbuckle, a member of the Race Task Force and a committee member for this Deconstructing Racism course formation. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to have a conversation with my friends Nelson and Joyce Johnson. I have known them for years, and I was reflecting as I was thinking about us getting together on how I first got to know you. And I'm thinking that it was through our mutual friend, C. Holler, who, with you and with Barbara DeWay, who was at the time a staff member at our church, formed the Beloved Community Center. And I'm pretty sure Z was a wonderful friend and gave me lots of spiritual guidance over the years. And I'm pretty sure he probably put his arm around me and said, Margaret, come over to the Beloved Community Center. There are people I want you to know and meet. And I met y'all, and over the years have that opportunity to feel welcomed in your Beloved Community Center and at Faith Church, Faith Community Church, where you've provided leadership. And I've said several times to you and to others that I feel like I've sat at your knee and been your student and learned more about the impact of racism than from any other experience I've had. And I'm just so grateful for our friendship and admire the two of you so much for the work that y'all have done. So thank you for being here. As I told you, First Presbyterian Church has been on this journey of working toward understanding the impact of racism in our world. And as with every turning of a page, we are learning more things that are horrific about our own history and about the history of the Caucasian people in our country. And we need to recognize those things, and we need to, as Brian Stevenson says, own them, know your history, own your history, take responsibility for it, and then you can move beyond it. And that's the journey that we are struggling to be on right now. And it's hard. It's very hard and very challenging for many of us, and certainly for me as well. But today we are focusing on the events in particular in our conversation with the two of you, the events of November 3rd, 1979, referred to as the Greensboro Massacre. And although that was over 40 years ago, it continues to linger in our community as a piece of history that has not been owned and understood and taken responsibility for in the way in which that we can move beyond it. I remember that day so vividly. There are a few historic moments that kind of imprint your brain. And I remember very much being with a group of friends watching a football game that afternoon, and a breaking news came forward with video of what had occurred, and being so horrified by it and thinking, how could that happen? And over the years of being with you and of having attended many of the sessions of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was formed several years following that, and continuing to read and try to seek understanding, I feel like there's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity for us to talk about it. You recall that, of course, that a play was written about it, and in fact was produced up at Princeton University, and I was one of the lucky people, along with several others from Greensboro, to get to go for its inaugural production. There's a historical marker in our community close to the site that was formerly Morningside Homes where this occurred. And in fact, we're encouraging our congregation to go visit that marker as one of their pilgrimage sites and on this particular section of our journey to understand what we need to do to deconstruct racism. But all of those, so 40 years have happened, have passed, and yet we are still dealing with this very serious issue. So what I invite you to do is to reflect on what happened and what needs to happen for us as a community to take responsibility so that we can own that history and move beyond it. So Joyce and Nelson, please share your ideas.
First, Margaret, thank you. And thank you for the friendship that we've enjoyed between you and Howard, and really our families. Over the years, we've shared the joys and the sorrows of our family and really grown closer and closer together as we continue on this journey toward truth, this journey toward justice, this journey toward reconciliation and healing and it's a privilege to walk it together, sometimes to run, sometimes to crawl. And yes, I do believe it was through Z Holler that we met, yet we have developed our own relationships over the years. So thank you for inviting us to be a part of this. Though we both grew up as Baptists, we feel very close to a lot of you good Presbyterians. Certainly
Right.
our dear friend, J. Herbert Nelson, and his wife, Gail, and Diane Moffett, and many others that we are close to, including Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, who leads the Poor People's Campaign along with Reverend Dr. Barbara. So we feel right at home having this conversation with you today. And as I understood your question, you want us to talk a bit about November 3rd, 1979, and it's something else that we're right here in the city where it happened, yet there's still so much unclarity, disbelief, a lot of denial about really what happened. But I'm glad that we're talking about it because it's through the conversations among people sitting eye to eye or Zoom to Zoom now to talk about our history so as to really craft a future that our children deserve and a future that the Lord that we all serve would have us enjoy. So Nelson, if you would just give a brief overview of your understanding of what November 3rd was and what it represents, and then maybe we can talk about some pathways forward.
Let me say it's good to be here and good to be with all of you and each of you. One of the challenges of November 3rd is putting it in context. It's almost as if a snapshot was taken of 88 seconds, and that froze the identity of myself and the organization that I was a part of then, that was publicly the Worker Viewpoint Organization, and had plans to change its name on November 3rd, 1979. I have a deep passion for what I define as the underdog, those who are marginalized, those who have been convinced of their own worthlessness and whose behavior sometimes mention that, not mention that, but models that. So I organized tutoring in Raywan homes when I was a student at A&T and was involved in many, many social justice activities preceding 1979. Most of that history is lost. In 1979, we were deeply involved in labor organizing. The president of the union at Haw River was Jim Waller, who was killed on that day. The leading organizer at Cone Mill, William Sampson, was killed on that day. A person who was just being located at the Cannon Mills, textile mills in Kannapolis, was killed on that day. Cesar Corsey, who was organizing chicken workers and non-academic employees at Duke University, was killed on that day. And Dr. Michael Nathan, who was there to provide medical aid. We were going to walk about 2 miles across town. All of that's part of contexting this. And let me just say very quickly that we learned that the film Birth of a Nation was being shown in China Grove. We went down and that the Klan and the Klan, not the Nazis, were actually having it at the city library, which was a small building in China Grove. I went down the day before and met the president of the neighborhood, had dinner with them and their family, and we discussed the meaning of bringing up this history within the context of the work we were doing. All of that is some of the context. Let me just say, I will come back to that a little later, but let me just say on that morning, we had been trying to get a parade permit and for weeks, and it was delayed and delayed and delayed. I finally held a press conference to demand that they give us a parade permit or tell us why they weren't giving us to. They gave it to us on that day. That would have been a Thursday, I believe, preceding November 3rd or whatever 3 days was before that. And I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know that the Klan and Nazis had formed a united racist front in Lewisburg, North Carolina, where Nazis and Klan actually discussed coming together and attacking us in Greensboro. I had no knowledge of this. I had no knowledge that the police asked Eddie Dawson, who was a Klanman, to pick up the parade permit. And he also joined our press conference and pretended to be someone in sympathy with us. I had no idea that carloads of Klan and Nazis came from around the state on the night before, gathered at a Klansman home outside of town. The police knew all of this. I had no idea that they were gathering to drive into the march. And I had no idea that Eddie Dawson, who was the informant for the Klan and Nazis, asked the police to cancel the march because he was fearful that things would get out of hand. They refused to do it. And they were not there when the Klan and Nazis drove in. There was some shouting back and forth, and these things happened. I think I saw the first shot being fired out of the window that the police informant was driving. He didn't fire it. A young man sitting in the vehicle fired it. And at that point, people ran back away from the front of the march toward the end of the march. Well, it was the 8th car in a 9-car caravan that the back trunk came up. They got these long weapons and fired on people who were trying to defend themselves. And I just named the people who were killed. They were not just random people in Morningside. They were the leading organizers in our organization. That is a little better context. It would take me too long to say more than that, but that's the picture. And once that happened, it was that 88 second that defined me and everybody else. And it was framed as a shootout between two equally abhorrent groups, neither of which was up to anything good. And that was the framing that was given to it. And I would venture to say about 90% of the population of Greensboro balked that understanding, and therefore regulated us to people who were looking for a fight and actually taunted the Klan and Nazis and or the Klan. We never knew Nazis were in North Carolina until this happened. I want to say before I end this sector, and then I wish there were time for questions, we made some mistakes. I think the way we call the Klan bad names leading up to this actually did contribute to the outcome of what happened. It was not the cause of it. The cause of it was we were actively organizing, and the company and our mayor, who called me the most dangerous person in Greensboro well before '79, were pushing back against that work. That was the fundamental conflict. And I think the Klan and Nazis objectively acted in service of the textile mills around the state. They may have been in collaboration with them. I can't attest to that. but I know that they served that interest because the union president was killed, leading organizers were killed, and we were effectively stopped from doing organizing at that period. So let me stop there for fear that I won't, because there's so much to this story. And I just want to express my appreciation for First Presbyterian for listening to a different framing of the event. And of course, the trials followed and all of that you're more familiar with.
One of the things that I have learned in fairly recent years is the issues around labor organizing within our textile industry and the fact that North Carolina so adamantly opposed it. And it's my understanding, that this is probably just a very elementary understanding, is that part of the underlying issue was that the workers in the mill, when the mill workforce was integrated, the white workers in the mill wanted to make certain that the African-American workers were seen as the lowest rung of the ladder. And that racial tension that existed within the mills could, I don't know, but I would speculate that racial tension impacted the context of the work of this labor organizing that you were attempting to do. But rather than dwelling more on that actual horrific day, I would love for y'all to reflect on the truth and reconciliation efforts that came out of that over a period of time, and what is the role of faith communities that, to my knowledge, and I don't speak as an expert at all on First Presbyterian's involvement in history, but to my knowledge, First Presbyterian was not actively engaged in its leadership was not actively engaged in the truth and reconciliation efforts. As I said, I attended many of the sessions just as a spectator, audience person, as did many others in the community. But I'd love for you to talk about what that meant and how that evolved and what it means going forward.
So the truth and reconciliation process was one that we at the Beloved Community Center, friends from this city and around the country, particularly those who were survivors of November 3rd, 1979. At one point, we declared ourselves survivors and not mere victims. And that was very important because it gave us voice, it gave us agency. So we formed the truth and reconciliation process because basically the courts failed us. Mm-hmm. The courts simply failed us. And we're seeing that repeated live right now in this country. And I pray that we will see some progress, some significant progress. The courts failed us. The media in many ways failed us. And I don't have time to elaborate all of those details now, but I would encourage any enterprising person to go back and track the way this incident was characterized. The first day, our local news, I think it was still the Daily News and the News and Record at that time, called it an ambush at Morningside. Within a day, it changed to shootout. And I can remember vividly being sort of ushered into a back door at News 2. Susan Kidd was the key Black reporter then who wanted to hear our story, and it became out on CBS News. And I remember seeing our then mayor at the news, at that TV station, talking and instructing the news representatives. And I've talked to some of those reporters since that time one said that he quit because for the first time he realized that he was being told what to say and he couldn't bear that. He said that at the truth process. So the media failed us and characterized us in ways that did not fully represent us. Some things, of course, you can pull facts and twist in image and tell a story. And again, we see that today. Yes, religious community initially in many ways failed us, because rather than standing on the truth, standing on justice, standing for those most oppressed, it was easier just to listen to what was being said. I mean, we were scared to death. Our children were there that day. There were lots of children who came with demonstrators. There were so many children in that neighborhood, Morningside Homes, who had to experience that incident. But the truth process was formed to work our way out of that, because we realized that though we had been these young organizers, activists, people called us, people were afraid of us. They thought we were the cause of what happened, as opposed to the circumstances of racism and oppression, separation, that really created those situations. So we think that it wasn't perfect, but it did result in a report that points to the truth, full of truth, really built a community truth. And we've been able to build on that. We continue to organize and work. And thank God, after almost 41 years, the current city council had the strength, after studying and debating for some time, meeting with clergy who were stepping up to the line more and more, decided to issue a substantive apology and also attach to that a way forward, particularly through working with our young people. So the truth process was an effort at that. It was generated by the people most impacted, but it really was something that I think paint a way of a path forward for this entire city. And we did it with that thought. As we did it, I talked a lot about having some place for our grandchildren to stand. At that point, we were grandparents at that point, and it was important for them to have somewhere to stand as they wade through this world. And I'm so grateful we were able to do that, because it's something now that many people from around the country are coming to us for help, asking how can they do something similar in their towns.
Talk about that. And also, you mentioned to me that there was a beginning of an organizing of a state truth and reconciliation. And as we are proceeding with this study, we are learning more and more about other incidents like the Wilmington lie, and in particular that's come forward recently, but many others that we need to delve into understanding.
Well, before I say a word about our plans for the North Carolina Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation process, I want to put in a strong plug for my friend. And I said at his funeral, at Z Holler, that he was the best white friend I had. I later changed that. He is one of the best friends that I've ever had, of any race. So the Presbyterians have been a part of my journey, and Herb Nelson and I became very, very close, and we remain so. Our families remain so. So I just want to say that. As for thinking about a North Carolina Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation program, it actually comes in on the heels of a nation that has grown increasingly fragile. It has not come together rooted in a moral, ethical foundation anywhere near where it should be. It actually has gone in a different direction. And there's no single leader who stands above that. Everybody now is caught up in the polarization, because so much of the base of the nation is caught up in it. And nothing more evident than that than January the 6th. We were well along on the planning for the North Carolina Truth process when that happened. And our view is that you really can't make much progress without considerable truth, historical truth and contemporary truth. You can't make much healing with just truth, but truth opens the door to healing. Once people can feel the humanity of the other and lean into it as part of your own being, we are part of a common humanity, not scattered humanity, although we are practicing that now. And the third thing is, with a truth and healing process, the door for authentic justice and repair of historical wrongs can be taken without getting tangled up in the blame game, that you're playing us or we're playing you, Black people waiting at home for welfare checks, white people can't get jobs because people are running over the border, on and on and on this scenario unfolds. So we thought that with the affirmation from the city of Greensboro around a piece of the truth about what happened, that we could build on that. And our view is that we want to think of the state in 3 regions, which it is divided into. One is the coastal plain, and we want to have 2 locations in each of those 3 regions. The other one is the Piedmont, where we are. The third one is the western part of the state. And we want to build real bases in those areas. By bases, we mean people who have sat down and talked with each other as we did, to stretch across the divides as best we can. And we're not talking about just, at first, thousands of people. We need groups of 15 and 20 and 30 and 100 people. And some of the people who are on very different ends of their understanding, we think that without a lot of fanfare and a lot of publicity, we want to help people walk toward each other. That we want people to feel the humanity of the other and buy into the possibility that once you feel that you can stand with the other and actually confess your own inadequacies and historical failures and invite others to do the same. And then we want to tie those 6 geographic areas together, which will give us something of a blanket for the state. And at that point, we want to become a lot more public and invite the whole state to let's model for ourselves first, and then perhaps for other people in our state, and then for people in the nation. There will be people doing similar activities all around the country. In fact, we're consulting with them. Philadelphia, for example, we have a workshop with them at the end of this month, and we're meeting with other people. But we think that there has to be a place where a model is really developed and not just talked about or speculated on. And we think North Carolina has a fair chance of that happening. And we're well along in that process. We've been meeting now for about 11 months with people who share this view. We haven't gone public with it except by mistake. I was talking to a group in Atlanta and slipped up and said, we're going to form a North Carolina. I said, I wasn't supposed to say that. But
maybe I don't want to lead you down a path that you don't want to go on, but I was excited when you or Joyce mentioned it to me. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Yeah, so you got a sense of what we are thinking about doing. We haven't identified the specific areas in those regions yet, and we want to hire an organizer in each of those spaces, not bring in one, but to find somebody whose heart is with this, who has some capacity to organize, and with our experience and help, we want to do a lot of training, a kind of, below the mechanism of publicity, and to help people feel and see each other and build on that. And we hope to get the support of our political community, at least a significant slice of it, some of the mayors around the state. And of course, if our governor can lean into it, that would be a bonus.
But churches in different houses of worship would be very, very key to this. It would be an opportunity for us to grow into our call.
Yeah.
Really to grow into our call. So we hope that churches will be a vital part of this.
Well, I can't speak for my congregation or session, but I would welcome the opportunity. One of the things that I've struggled with a lot over these most recent years is this deep division, and consequently the deep division in my circle of friends, and how we tend to gravitate toward those who are most like us in conviction. And I need the opportunity to listen to others. Yeah, our time is up, and I'm just so grateful. I could talk to you for hours, and I just feel like we can't Zoom for hours, but I'm just so grateful for your willingness to chat with me about this and to share your deep understanding of what our challenges are within our community and within our state and in our nation. And I look forward to learning more about how we can move this forward. Y'all are wonderful friends, and I'm so grateful for it. Thank you very much.
And thank you, and thank First Presbyterian.
Thanks, Margaret. Blessings to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, First Pres. I'm Victoria Alexander, and I'm both an FPC member and a member of Presbyterian Church USA's Young Adult Volunteer Program. And I'm here with Catherine Johns, our church elder and the tour coordinator and research specialist in the education department at the Greensboro History Museum. Welcome to week 5 of Deconstructing Racism at FPC, our past, present, and future. We're joined today by local Greensboro artist and activist Gina Franco. And this week we're going to discuss and reflect on the ways that art and activism intersect, specifically in the Black Lives Matter protest movement throughout 2020 in our nation and in our local community, and ways that we can sustain the movement for justice and equity into the future. Gina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh,
I'd like to start
thanks for having me.
Of course. I'd like to start by inviting your reflections on how art and activism have intersected in your work so far.
Well, I guess, when I think about, I never would consider myself an activist because I kind of picture that being more like that's an action, like you go out and I'm picturing like protesting and petitions and things like that. So, but after, the Black Lives Movement and, kind of, that was for me, that was the first time I really felt like they did come together. And I was, I would call it a visual protest, because that was what I considered it. And yeah, that was the first time it really kind of, they came together.
Could you maybe talk a little bit more about how you saw art and activism intersect in Greensboro over the past year throughout the protests and even since then?
Yeah, that's it. That's an example. So my niece, who participated, she was one of the muralists who painted. She's enrolled in UNCG now, and one of her courses, they're actually using the Black Lives Matter movement, everything that happened as a tool to teach, as a teaching tool. So she's, in class, and she's like, I was there, she was actually there. And so, yeah.
How do you think both last summer and since then, your art and your work has been received in Greensboro? Like, what have you seen people doing? Or, since then, how have other artists done similar work through activism?
Well, I think that, like, I realized during that time that I do have a platform, and so I was like, I realized that, like, all I did was put something on my social media, like, hey, this is what we're doing downtown, if anybody wants to paint. And then, like, people were showing up. So I kind of realized, oh, wow, like, I can actually use my platform, for good or for social change. And, I definitely, some of the artists that participated in that did not even consider themselves artists, but they're doing art now, like, to see, like Ashley and, some of these other people that I was able to meet, like, since then, like, it's like, taken off, and they realized, they're that this is what they wanted to do. So that's pretty amazing.
Gina, let me ask you a question. What did you use to paint your mural?
Just bucket paint, like everything I had in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I did, like that morning when I decided that was what I was going to do. I just grabbed everything I could and threw it. I didn't worry about colors or, I just threw everything I had here in my studio in my truck, and just took it down there, and it just, went from there. So just bucket paint, spray paint, just anything.
And you are a muralist. That's one of your primary forms.
Yes. And that, that is my job, that's my job. I'm a full-time artist. Yes.
Yeah, something that really struck me during the protest was like people were just using cardboard boxes they brought from home, and if all they had was black Sharpie, they were still making
right
and using.
And that's exactly like that. For I think by day like 3, or maybe it was even 2 or 3, that we realized that we had a lot of people that wanted to use their voice and express themselves. So we did. There was some organizing at that point. Where we reached out to community members. We had paint donated from Home Depot. People were just dropping stuff off all day long, paints and paintbrushes, and so that when we wanted to make sure, like, when somebody would show up, like we could just, how can we support them? Like they want to just create, how can we make that easier? So we were, it's like, whatever you need, like I just show up. That's what I would tell people. Just, they were calling, emailing, DMing, like I had, messages everywhere that I had to kind of round up, but I just said, just show up, just come, we'll figure it out. Don't worry. So yeah, that was, that's kind of how we worked, just donations and, the community, big time. So it was, I think that was the most beautiful thing, I guess, out of, there's circumstances that cause this are not beautiful, it's a really bad thing. But that, seeing, people uplifting each other, like we're basically, like, how can, I'll prime this wall for you so you can write a message, or this person volunteering to, whatever, deliver pizza to the artist. Like just, just this community, I always tell people, like, you had to be there, but, because it's kind of hard to explain that feeling. Because I've never seen Greensboro in that way ever. I haven't seen Greensboro like that since either. That is definitely a moment in time that you can't recreate. But I would hope that we can do more things like that, and like come together and do paint jams and all these fun things. But so if anything, I hope that that kind of sticks. Somehow something from that, can be carried over and used, for social change. Because it's not, I know it's, you can't change it overnight or anything, but it was definitely, a step. But there, of course, there's so much more work to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what you said was really poignant about how, like, all people had to do was just show up. Because I think a lot of times in advocacy and activism, people are so caught up in, I don't know what to do. And a lot of times just showing up is, you show up, someone will tell you how you can help, or just, reaching that hand out and saying, I'm here, what can I do? And you kind of mentioned this too, but, we don't want last year to be an anomaly. We want to sustain this work in Greensboro. What are some ways you think art can sustain these movements and this community organization and cooperation and support?
Well, I think we definitely proved the power of art through that. When you think about politics and things like this, it's always like, oh, I don't know, it was, almost like a sneak attack. Like we, just, and then all of a sudden, pow, and put it in everybody's face. To where, like, I feel like that's the best thing you can do, like catch people off guard, but like to really appeal to them emotionally. And like, I think it needs, creativity and art, if you really want like an emotional, I think that was during that time, you had the COVID, the lockdown, everybody, and I was definitely going through some, mental health things. And like, so when I think about healing and, like that's how I heal, through art. I mean, I think that, to really appeal to people's like emotions, which I think is really what we need to do, we need art, to kind of spark that. And, I think that we just proved that, one, we have a lot of talented people in Greensboro. We have people who didn't even know they were artists until a year ago. And why not? No, we can't like replicate what we did, but why not use a little bit of that? Like, okay, so a community paint day or something. Maybe chalk art in the streets, but yeah, like just kind of just like look back and actually figure out what was, like the power, I guess, the effects that it had, and how can we, use that again? Like, what can we learn from that? Like, okay, we need more, we have a lot of artists and a lot of creatives here, let's put more funding towards that and more, stuff like that. So yeah, but yeah, it's definitely, I think about like old paintings, like in museums, like century old paintings, and there's like a battle scene or like a, whatever, but like, it's storytelling. So like, that's why I think that like visually, it's very important to document like what's happening in the times, because we have to think about other generations, so I think that, yeah, it's not a modern, like, it's definitely not a modern thing. Like, we've definitely been using art, and signs, and, it's just powerful. Yeah,
Absolutely, it is. It's very powerful, particularly.
Thank you.
And absolutely gorgeous. It's very, it's stark, but I think that that's extremely appropriate.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Could you share with us a person, collective, or organization that inspires you in your work as an artist and an activist?
Like specific? Well, no, I mean, I don't know. Like, I always it's like a generic, just people, where I get my inspiration from. Because I mean, my work is pretty much 100% relies on people interacting with it. Like it's not even, it doesn't live or anything. It's like until somebody like takes a picture with it or, some sort of interaction. So like, I depend heavily on the public and, for my inspiration. So, yeah, I mean, like, everybody inspires me. I don't know if I could say that, but it just comes, I mean, it's always different. Who inspires me.
Let me ask you this, Gina. What inspired you to go out that next day and paint that mural?
I was just sick of hearing about, like, I felt like everybody was focusing on like the damage and, like these, everything was boarded up. And like, so from what I could tell, just at being not down there, I was just on the internet and, Facebook and things like that. It was just, I felt like that's what everybody was talking about, was the riots or the whatever they called it, So, and I understood that. I have good friends that are business owners downtown too. So, of course, so I kind of felt like, let's give them something else to talk about. It wasn't about like, let's make it look pretty. you know, like some art, you know, definitely some projects I've done is to just aesthetically enhance a place, make it look better, make it it wasn't about that at all. I was just thinking about, you know, the boards just being up, and I was thinking about the protesters, you know, the marching, and I was like, well, you know, let's give them, like, how can I, because at that point it was an I thing. It was definitely me wanting to do something and show my support. And so I was, you know, let's give them something to encourage them to keep going, you know, like, so, because I knew that they'd be coming through Elm Street, you know, at some point. So I was like, well, you know, I want to give them something to see. At that point, it was just going to be one. It was just like, the Black Lives Matter was the first one. And I was like, okay. And then I just kept going. And then by the, you know, day 3 or 4, they're marching, and they literally have art everywhere, you know, like the people tell, you know, like, we're supporting you. So.
And was one of those friends Jennifer Graff?
Yeah, she was, because she was one, you know, I knew I had to get permission. So she, you know, like, of course I thought of her first because I knew I could just call her and get permission, you know. So definitely, and I knew, you know, her feelings were, you know, probably mirroring mine. Like, I knew she wanted to also, you know, support the movement. And so, you know, she was definitely the first, I guess, shop owner to kind of take that stance. Like, you know, it sucks. My windows got busted, and, you know, sucks. But, you know, I'm still supporting the movement. And so, you know, we helped each other on that. And it just, like I said, I mean, it just took off. But just waking up every morning, it was like, I have to be downtown. There was no question. You know, it was like they had to, like, peel me off the street by, like, day, what, you know, like, I'm like, are we done? Like, it was so weird to not be downtown, you know, or not have a purpose. Like, I felt like, what am I going to do today now? Like, that was my purpose. That was my everything, you know, during that time. So that was hard. It was like a post depression or something, like post movement depression or something. I definitely felt, and then, you know, I also felt like I want to do more now. Like, it definitely, I think that since then, the projects that I've picked, you know, are, you know, definitely, you know, I'm not just like trying to get paid. And, you know, it used to be like, I would go do something that, you know, for some money or something. But, like, now I have the luxury now to, you know, because I have a lot of project offers that I can kind of pick those ones that are meaningful, you know, in some way. Because since, I mean, that was such a, you know, the bar was set, I think, for me, was like, you know, you should be doing important things with your art. Like, look at what you did, you know, like, well, you know, look, you inspired all these people, and you did, you know, so it's like, I'm going to get that feeling over and over again. So I'm definitely choosing more, you know, I call them, like, you know, passion projects, or definitely community, public art, you know, all inclusive. I think it's important that people can connect with the murals. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to do that, like, and everybody, not just like a one, you know, person. Like, how can I, you know, I want everybody to see themselves in my art, which is challenging. But yeah, so that's definitely where I, you know, like, yeah. But yeah, that morning I just had to be, like, it's like I had to. There's no other way to explain it.
You know, when you're not sure where to start, or we all feel like we're not doing enough, but just one person starting something or a small group starting something is how all big movements happen. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, like downtown last summer, like, and even looking at it now and what it's turned into with the way it shaped you personally and how you decide which projects you're going to choose. And, you know, the class at UNCG, and even you know, the exhibit at the History Museum, or this class at our church now. I think you know, just you starting that has snowballed into all of this. And I think that's what we want for this class, for our church too, is for this to snowball into all of these people going out and figuring out ways that they can just show up and start working. So thank you so much for talking with us today and for sharing your time. It's really incredible what you've done for us, but also for our city as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
You did amazing, Dina. Thank you very, very much. And I hope that you feel how much we appreciate the work that you started and everything you've done. And we, of course, we appreciate the others, the protesters who are actually out there as well. And we're hopefully going to be able to speak to Miss Virginia Holmes a little bit later.
Right.
But your work really sparked a wildfire of art and activism, and I extremely appreciate it, obviously, and I think that everyone's going to really appreciate being able to hear your words.
No. Well, thank you.
No, thank you.